Hello, this is the Captain back, so welcoming you back to the weekly hunt on week 13 this time around. Still doing the good old charge blade, and I've actually gotten to the point where I feel kind of comfortable with it. I never thought it would happen, but, you know, time, practice, and dedication, and sometimes I actually feel like I'm doing pretty well. It's still kind of like, sometimes I feel amazing with it, and other times I feel absolutely trash with it. But the other day when I was playing, I was kind of fumbling the charge blade, not like really, really badly, and I kind of got to thinking of the mentality that I was in when I was playing it, because I wasn't really paying too much attention, and that was kind of my downfall. But at the same time, it kind of shows that I'm getting good enough at the charge blade to where I can start to play without having to focus as much with what I'm doing. Like, I can just sort of do things off of reflex and muscle memory and all of that, but I'm not quite at that level where I can just autopilot with the weapon. So I feel like, at least, it's definitely a sign that I am getting better with the weapon, which makes me feel good, This weapon has always given me a lot of difficulty when I learned about the red shield and red sword kind of buffs, but I am finally getting to the point where I'm like, I can do this. I'm not awful with this weapon. So speaking of the week ofs using different weapons, next week is going to be week of the hunting horn, which I'm really looking forward to doing, because the hunting horn is a weapon that I want to dedicate more time to, because it's very satisfying to do in team fights or in multiplayer. But I just haven't put the time into it, Haven't really found the desire to really hunt with hunting horns as much as any of the other weapons, per se. So if you want to see me main a particular weapon for a future week, leave a suggestion in the comments, and that will be the weapon that I'll use after the week of the hunting horn, that is next week. So week after next, I'll get onto using that weapon. Otherwise, it's just going to be another random weapon. But anyway, so how many days was it after last week's episode, after Wednesday, that Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate was announced? It was maybe 1 or 2 days, as I'm getting absolutely mopped up by this Odo Garen. This is the half of the time where I get very frustrated with the charge blade, and I feel like I can't do anything. But again, it's all part of learning the weapon, it's all part of getting better, and it's all part of being a scrub. But Generations Ultimate was announced a couple days after last week's what's it called? Weekly hunt, hence why it wasn't spoken about in last week, but it will be in this week, obviously. Generations Ultimate, which is essentially just MHXX for the West. It's that hashtag that you might have seen floating around the internet, and hey, we got it. Which I'm excited. I'm really excited for Generations Ultimate, because last month I got a Switch, and it wasn't really for the games that were already out. Like, I've got, Mario Kart on it, I got, Minecraft and Stardew Valley on it. There's not really any games out now that I'm all that terribly interested in. However, there are gonna be plenty of games in the future that I am more than interested in. I mean, I'm somewhat interested in getting Dark Souls Remastered on the Switch. I'm definitely gonna be picking up the newest Pokemon that comes out, and now, Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, of course. And of course, there'll always be the longer a console is out, the more interesting games come out. So, there'll be a surprise release at some point in the future that'll be on the Switch, and I'll be like, I'm gonna pick that up. So that was really convenient for me. But also, last month, I picked up Monster Hunter Generations for the 3DS. And you can actually port your save file from Generations onto Generations Ultimate from the 3DS onto the Switch. So me playing Generations isn't going to be a complete waste of time because I can transfer that save onto the Switch so I can get a bit of a head start, which will be pretty nice. Because, I mean, it's not like Generations has like a super slow start to getting to some decent monsters, but in comparison to Monster Hunter World, getting to, say, the equivalent of maybe Anjanath, you know, your first, like, challenging monster, so to speak, it takes a hell of a lot longer in World, or in Generations, sorry, than it does in World. In World, it's like, what, your 5th or 6th quest? Something like that? Maybe not 6th quest. It's about an hour, maybe 2 hours in. In Generations, I've put about 20 hours into the game, and I'm not quite there. I'm about at the I'm about at Baroth, let's say, for example, just as comparison. I've only just fought Kezu. It takes time, man. Plus, there are like 3 times as many monsters in Generations as there are in World, so it takes a while to get through it all. But it's good fun because there's so many more different pieces of equipment to create so many more different sets. In World, I feel like there are a couple of weapons where you just sort of have to question, why would I ever use this? This doesn't make... No. But in Generations, you're kind of like, okay, well, this one is a poison weapon, and this one is a poison weapon, but this one has more physical damage, this one has more poison, and a slot. Something like that. Like, everything's kind of comparable in a really nice sense. Like, you would want to use this one over this one, if that makes any sort of sense. And that kind of brings me into some criticisms of Monster Hunter World that I kind of have. Not to say that Monster Hunter World is a bad game at all. I absolutely love Monster Hunter World. If this game didn't come out and I didn't enjoy it, I would never have gotten into Monster Hunter. I owe this game so much for getting me into a franchise that I otherwise probably never would have gotten into, you know? So, yeah, big props to Monster Hunter World. It's a fantastic game. But there are criticisms of it. One of them, of course, being like the lack of monsters, and, well, hopefully there'll be more monsters. Well, there'll definitely be more monsters introduced in the future, such as the Devil Joan, Kulve Taroth, and whatever else, probably like Zinogre, Nagakuga, Tigrex, all that sort of fun stuff. And, of course, G rank eventually will come out. It's not out yet, so the game is a bit easy, unfortunately. But that's okay, you know. We can build up our arsenals, get some min-max our gear if you're into that sort of thing, which I get a bit bored trying to min-max armor, especially when I'm trying to get a shit ton of gear. Oh yeah, using Lance in this because I didn't feel confident in using Charge Blade. I actually wanted to get this armor as opposed to just struggle against Nergigante like way too many times, so I decided to go with the Lance because I'm like, I'm not using Charge Blade against this monster. And I find Nergigante to be incredibly challenging, and especially in the arena where you don't have breaks in the fight to kind of recuperate and resharp and reapply buffs and all that. So I was just like, nah, I'm gonna have to pussy out and I'm gonna have to go for Lance, as I did. That was a pretty quick hunt though. That was like, what, 4 minutes? Just under 5. I think actually we were like 30 seconds off of getting the A rank, which was like, oh, I mean, that sucks because we could have gotten 3 of those rewards in one go instead of the 2 that we got. But alas. So back onto the criticisms of Monster Hunter World. I've spoken about the weapons, like some of them kind of being like, why would you ever want to use this? This kind of seems a bit pointless and not very good, for lack of a better term. But also the designs. Like, unfortunately, and I kind of understand why they did this, a lot of the weapons in this game use the same base model. Take the bone greatswords, for example. So you have like the regular bone greatsword. It uses the same model as like the Baroth greatsword, or base model as the Baroth greatsword, and the Radoban greatsword, and a couple others that I can't remember off the top of my head. But they all use that same kind of like giant tooth kind of greatsword, and then they just slap on some other monster materials on it. And it kind of looks okay, but at the same time, you can see the base model behind all of it. And another good example of this is the Jagras and Radoban sword and shields. They both use that kind of club model, but they just put some monster materials on it to try and hide that. That's not the case in Generations. Every single weapon is unique in some semblance. I mean, the ones that are the most similar are some of the prey weapons. So, like the Velociprey, the Gaia Prey, and the Gen Prey. Those three weapons, they all have the same model, sure, and again, it's kind of like they have the different color scales of the different monsters, but that's like the most similar that weapons get in terms of looks. If you look at something like the Najalat, give me a second trying to pronounce this, Najarala. It's like a giant snake wyvern. It looks super cool and I can't wait to fight it. You got that monster, and then you've got the Malfestio as well, which is like an owl. That's a cool monster. Kind of a pain in the ass because it reverses your controls and puts you to sleep, but practice makes perfect, I guess. Those two weapons, they use the similar design for their swords, and what I mean by that is like the sword, instead of it coming out like a regular sword, it kind of goes around the knuckle, kind of like a giant knuckle duster in a crescent bladed sense. They both use that style of a sword, but they both look incredibly different. Like the Najarala one, the scales on it are green and they're very cubical, they're very square, quadrilateral, whereas with the Malfestio, it's all feathered and very blue and a lot more sleek and curved as opposed to kind of angular like the Najarala. And also the shield on the Najarala is kind of like a spiral kind of thing, to kind of be like the snake thing kind of motif going on, whereas with the Malfestio one, it's just like a proper shield that's kind of decorated with really nice blue feathers. They look very different, even though the blade are kind of a same or a similar structure. You get what I mean? They're not just reused assets, which is one of the biggest criticisms of Monster Hunter World. I mean, you look at this lance that I'm using right now, that model is used for the Steel Lance, the Thunder Lance, as you can see, the Dodo Gamma Lance, and a bunch of, again, I can't really remember them off the top of my head, but those are just 3 examples of this model. The most unique model that, or I should say the most unique models of weapons in this game are for Elder Dragons. And you know, that's not a bad thing, it makes them stand out a hell of a lot more, but it's like, you could make these awesome unique models for all of the weapons instead of just slapping on some monster parts onto an already existing base model. I don't know, it's an aesthetic thing. It makes certain weapons stand out a hell of a lot more. The unique weapon models of the Elder Dragons, though, I have to say, look fantastic. I mean, the Kirin Switch Axe looks incredible. All of the Kirin weapons look incredible. Well, actually, I take that back. The Sword and Shield is just a standard. Hey, look, it's like the Bone Kukri with like the hook kind of thing, but it's got like some white fur on it. Yay! Hey, really? Oh, come on, it's an Elder Dragon, and you want to make it look. Oh well. See, it's a bit of a shame, but at the end of the day, they are all different weapons, and they all do different things. But yeah, Monster Hunter's good fun. And I'm looking forward to playing a heck of a lot more Generations. In fact, I have been playing mostly Generations over the past week. I've been grinding it out, fighting like a bunch of Velocidromes and all that sort of stuff, like some Yin Kutkus. I mean, it's Monster Hunter, what do you expect? I've kind of done everything there is to do in Monster Hunter World, aside from get all of the gold crowns. That's like the only thing that I haven't done. And farming for more materials, but I'm kind of getting a bit sick of it at this point. I don't know. It's like, it's strange, isn't it, how Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Generations, they're both Monster Hunter games. They're both used the same kind of gameplay loop where you're grinding for materials, but because I haven't played as much Generations and it's all new to me, it's all like new areas, new monsters, new combat mechanics, all that sort of stuff. It's all exciting and new and fresh, and I don't know any of this. I want to play it more, and I think that's the big distinction here, is that I'm not sick of Monster Hunter. I know World a bit too well, and it's kind of getting a little bit tiring. Hence why I'm doing the week ofs. I'm trying to challenge myself by learning new weapons so that I can, you know, maybe re-experience some of the fun of learning new stuff, you know? But on top of that, I'm also trying to farm for materials to make other sets, armor sets, to try and spice things up a bit, because unfortunately in Monster Hunter World there is the big meta of maximum attack, and I can't really speak too much on Generations, but I feel like Generations, there's a bit more diversity. It's a bit how should I say, it's very easy in World to make some really powerful offensive sets, whereas it's a lot harder to do in Generations, just thanks to how acquiring armor skills works. In Generations, every piece of armor has a number associated with the armor skills that it gives. So if we go for attack, it might only give 2 attack, and you need 10 to be able to get attack up small. So you're not just getting a little bit of attack with every piece of armor that has attack up on it. You have to wait until you get to that threshold before you can cash in with that skill. So it kind of makes it so you have to do some like clever management of your armor to try and get the maximum number of skills possible. On my current armor set, again, super early into the game, so it's super scrubby. I'm using the Great Macau set bar the headpiece, which is the alloy piece, and then I've put in all of the slots that I have available speed sharpening jewels, or grinder jewels. So I've got Stamina Thief and Speed Sharpener. And the idea is that with my sword and shield, I use my shield attacks more often to try and stun and exhaust the monster, but then also if I'm using a sword and shield that has maybe not great sharpness, I can resharpen in the middle of combat, and I don't really have to worry about going through that super lengthy animation. It's not a particularly great armor set, and I'm looking to replace it with maybe a Bulldrome set or a Kezu set, or pretty much anything that's a bit stronger than it, that gives me a bit more of a benefit. Maybe get some Fate on there for increased quest rewards and all that. But for what it does pretty well. The Stamina Thief, I seem to exhaust monsters really, really quickly, so that's always good fun. And early on in the game, when your weapon doesn't do a whole heck of a lot of damage like mine don't, trying to exhaust monsters is a perfectly viable strategy. You know, I've been told by some people that, you know, trying to focus on exhaust is not so much of a good idea, because why would you focus on exhausting the monster when you could just deal more damage? And the answer is, well, what if your weapon doesn't deal a lot of damage? You know, exhausting can really benefit the whole team, not just you, you know? On top of that, if you can deal exhaust damage to the head, obviously it deals stun damage, right? Dealing stun damage is always useful. Even if you don't manage to KO a monster yourself, it really helps out other people KO a monster. So it's like, exhaust damage isn't terrible. It's not the best thing on the planet, but it's not as bad as some people make it out to be, you know? But anyway, exhaust tirade over, as we're hunting Black Diablos, and I'm really trying to figure out how best to use the Charge Blade. I mean, I wanted to fight this Diablos for I can't remember specifically what it was. It might have just been the weekly quest. But it also helps me to get my guard points on point, for lack of a better term. Because it does have some good moves that you can predict. But the thing is I'm really not too sure what you can go from guard, like what you can chain a guard point into. I've heard you can chain it into an ultra or a super amped elemental discharge, but I haven't tried it myself because I'm, well, frankly too chicken to try. You might be thinking like, wow, that Black Diablos did not do that much damage. Well, first of all, it's not tempered. Like, that's the big distinction. If this was a tempered Black Diablos, that probably would have done about 3/4 of my health, because the armor that I'm wearing is the full Odogaron set, but it's unupgraded. None of it's upgraded at all. I've got like 360 defense. So the reason why this monster is not doing that much damage is simply because it's not tempered. That's all it is. It isn't to do with my armor at all, because my armor's, quite frankly, shit. But yeah, I should really be experimenting more with what to do with guard points. Like, it launched into the air there. Getting more efficient with getting into the red shield and red sword and all that sort of good stuff. It's good fun. It's good fun to just try and learn and try and get better and fail occasionally. That sonic bomb actually seemed to, like, hit my guard. And at this point in the hunt, real life things had to be tended to, so I couldn't really focus too much on the fight itself. Shit happens, But as for Monster Hunter Generations, even though obviously I'm not recording the footage, I wish I could, but I don't have a 3DS capture card. If I did, then I would absolutely be bringing you some Generations footage as part of the weekly hunt. In fact, this week's footage would definitely have been a hell of a lot more Generations footage than World footage if I did that. What was I talking about? Train of thoughts. Gotta love them. Oh yeah, the weapons that I'm using. I'm using the sword and shield in Generations, and if you're new to Monster Hunter with World and you've used the sword and shield in World, then I would honestly recommend trying to use the sword and shield in Generations, because it hasn't changed all that much. Pretty much the only things that you don't have in Generations that you do in World is the follow-up from the backstep, where you lunge towards, well, you have to lunge towards after you charge the backstep, but you don't launch yourself into the air and do a mount attack. And the other thing is you don't have the infinite triangle combo where you can just, change directions on the analog stick and then hit triangle and you do that slash. Those are the only two things that you don't have. And the launch into the air and mount attack that you get from the backstep, you actually get with Adept style. And that's another thing. Styles, very different, right? I've been rocking with Adept style with the SNS because when you do the Adept, which is an evade, you evade through an attack, it gives you like this super fancy corkscrew evade animation, and then you can charge back in to the monster, and then you do a follow-up attack. The follow-up attack with Sword and Shield Adept is literally that launch into the air and mount attack that you get following the backstep in World, right? So you can mount with Adept, Sword and Shield, which kind of makes me think, like, why would you use Aerial Sword and Shield? Because Aerial Sword and Shield, or just Aerial in general, replaces your evade with kind of a bit of a somersault, and if that somersault comes into contact with a monster, it deals a little bit of mounting damage and allows you to jump over the monster and do a mount attack. So I kind of think, why would you do Aerial SNS when you can do Adept SNS and still mount the monster but get the benefit of being able to do that crazy evade? I haven't really experimented too much with Striker or Guild being basically just your bog standard moveset, and then Striker being slightly less of a regular moveset, but you get more Hunter arts. Haven't experimented too much with them, but Striker SNS is meant to be really good because it still retains some of the versatility, or quite a lot of the versatility that the SNS has, but it also gives you, like I said, 3 Hunter Arts. Hunter Arts being basically just special moves that you charge up by hitting monsters, and then you can activate them. They can range anything from like a super amazing Ultra Evade to increasing your health, like natural health regen, or it can be something weapon specific, like with the SNS it can give you this spin attack which has a few invincibility frames, or like this crazy like series of super fast slashes which is super good at like building up elemental and status damage and whatnot. Excuse me. And good God. Or maybe like well, it's called Shoryugeki, and I'm sure you know what a Shoryuken is. It's basically that, but you do it with your shield. It does quite a ton of stun damage, but I can't aim that for shit. Probably because I'm not fighting very big monsters, so it's very difficult for it to land, but also because I'm just really bad with it. But yeah, there's some pretty powerful Hunter Arts are pretty powerful, so with Striker getting 3 is quite a big deal. But like I said, I've just been running with Adept SNS with the... Well, I did start off with the Spiral Attack, the spin kind of thing, but I moved on to using the super fast series of slashes because I want to make a setup that focuses on doing status damage, whether it be poison or paralysis or whatever, and that's going to be really good because it's a shit ton of hits in a super short amount of time. You're going to be stunning things incredibly well, especially if you have like status attack up on a good like status weapon. For example, you know, you're going to be hitting those paras quite frequently, I imagine. And that's one of the sets that I'm trying to farm, is a status set where I'm having to farm the Banabras, which are basically Vespoids. Try and get that full set, and that gives me status attack up because it's not like poison, paralysis, sleep attack. They're all put into one category called sleep or status attack up, and that has 2 levels, level 1 and level 2. Well, +1 and +2. The first one you get at 10 points, and the second one you get at 15. I don't have a way to get 15, so I have to go for the 10, which is okay, you know. It works out, because the Banabra set also gives you sharpness, which gives you the skill Razor Sharp, which essentially just halves the amount that your sharpness depletes by. It's really powerful, you know. So if you've got, say, 20 units of sharpness, with Razor Sharp, you've essentially got 40. It's not how it works, but it's similar to how it works. It basically just halves how much sharpness is consumed per hit. Right? So, in essence, it doubles your sharpness. It's not like Handicraft where it increases your sharpness bar so you can get into white sharpness. It doesn't do that. It just increases the amount each bar has, you know? Gives you more bang for your buck, which is really powerful for weapons that don't have a lot of sharpness. And when you're early in the game, most weapons don't have a lot of sharpness. I have a couple weapons that manage to get into green sharpness, but a lot of them do not have a lot of green sharpness, unfortunately. I mean, some of them do, but not all of them. So Razor Sharp is going to really help with that, but it's like, trying to get that full set is a pain in the ass, because if you've ever tried to farm the Vespoid set in Monster Hunter World, you probably know how annoying it is, you know. When you kill the Vespoid, or Horneter even, they don't always drop a corpse. Sometimes they just explode, right? And from my personal experience, it seems to be like a 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 chance that you'll actually get a corpse that you can use. Or that you can carve. And I haven't come across like an entomologist skill or whatever where you can just, it increases the likelihood of you getting the corpses. You can use poison smoke bombs, but That's another thing in Generations. Resources are really limited in the early game. It gets a lot better late game when you've been gathering these materials for a really long time, but early on, it's pretty expensive to put your toadstools and your bomb casings into smoke bombs just to farm some insects. Right, so what I've been doing is I've been going into missions that want you to kill these Banabras, and I've literally just taken the smoke bombs that they give you and not used them. Because what that does is it'll put it in my inventory so that I can use them later if I ever want to use those poison smoke bombs again. It means I don't have to craft them. Of course, it does mean that, you know, the farming is going to take a little bit longer, but it's not really the end of the world. I'm only a little bit away from getting that full set. As there was a weird jump cut there, I'm not really sure what that was about. I think I went into the PlayStation home menu. Oh well, Share Factory just showing its teeth. As the pickle shows up. This episode has been a lot about me comparing Monster Hunter World with Generations, as opposed to me focusing on the Charge Blade, because we did kind of focus on the Charge Blade a little bit last week, and this is pretty much just me getting better with the Charge Blade, getting to the point where I'm actually comfortable with it. So you kind of already know my general road to getting good with this weapon. It started off like, I absolutely hate this weapon, I don't understand it at all, to now I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, this weapon actually makes sense, and I'm not opposed to using it, but I'm still kind of not really that great with it. That's pretty much the road. But also, it's like, I've been playing a lot of Generations and I want to talk about it. This is the whole purpose of why the weekly hunt was made, was because, hey, I'm in love with this game and I want to talk about it. And just because there's Monster Hunter World footage in the background, I don't think that prevents me from being able to talk about Generations. They're both Monster Hunter. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, you know, this is my channel, I can talk about whatever I want. I always forget that you can actually guard tremors. But anyway, Generations. One of the big things that changes in the combat in Generations that I think is going to trip a lot of people up if you're new to Monster Hunter with World, like I am. Like, this is all the perspective of someone who's brand new to Monster Hunter, or not brand new, but new to Monster Hunter with World, and then has gone back to Generations and gone, oh, that's very different, that's very weird. When a monster wants to turn around, in World, the monster just turns around like that, 180, right? Did it just perfectly fine, just decided to want to do a 180. In Generations, monsters can only turn 90 degrees at a time, and it looks really weird and really janky, but at the same time it's kind of a part of the charm. So they turn like 90 degrees and then they'll turn another 90 degrees. It's so weird. Like, they do a 90 degrees, stop, pause for a second, and then do another 90 degrees. It's so goofy looking, but at the same time, like, it's pretty dangerous because toenail damage. I've mentioned toenail damage in the past, and it as something that I really don't like, and it is everywhere in Generations. Like, every time a monster does that 90-degree turn, toenail damage. It'll trip you up, to do a little bit of damage, and it's super frustrating. Thing is, in Generations, is I haven't really come across anything that's that big to the point where you're having to hit their feet all of the time, because that's the big problem with Xeno'jiiva, is because he's so big, his feet are huge, which means his footsteps are massive, so it's very easy for him to trip you. But also, unless you're using like an insect glaive or a gunner weapon, you have to focus on the legs because everything else is out of reach, so it just increases your chance of getting tripped. I haven't really come across anything that big in Generations yet. I mean, like, the biggest thing I've come across is Gammoth, which that was a rather interesting experience. I went on a basic hunt to get like 3, what are they, Popo tongues? It basically just like, it's essentially like, oh, go out and get like some Kelby horns or some Kelby hide or something like that. Get 3 of those. But the thing is when I found the Popo, great name by the way, they're kind of like mammoths. That's when just Gammoth, this giant mammoth, comes in, and I'm like, wait, what? This quest lets you fight Gammoth? Okay. I'm gonna fight Gammoth. And I went in there with my Prowler, because I decided I want to play Prowler, because that's the thing you can do. You can play as a Palico. And I got destroyed. If you don't know, with Prowler, you have a health bar. When that gets depleted, you then have an acorn that you consume, and then it gives you another life bar. When that gets depleted, you have a second acorn that you consume, and it gives you another life bar. Once that's depleted, that's when you cart. You essentially have 3 lives per cart with the Prowler, right? And I consumed all of them trying to take out Gammoth, right? All of them. It got to the point where I was on my last cart and I lost both of my acorns, and I decided I just gotta cut my losses and complete this quest. Like, I can't beat Gammoth. My weapons were doing jack shit, my armor was terrible, and of course my skills are not up to snuff. You know, I don't know how to fight Gammoth. It's a completely new monster to me. So I was just like, I can't do this. I need to leave. But it has me super excited to fight Gammoth in the future. And that's just one of the cool things that Monster Hunter does really well, is that, like, it kind of ties your character progression with the player's progression, in the sense that when you start off, you have nothing. No equipment, like terrible armor, terrible weapons, like no potions or demon drugs or might pills or nullberries or anything like that. None of that. And also, you're completely clueless. You have no idea how to play the game. You have no idea what the locations are. You have no idea where to farm this, that, and the other. You have no idea how to fight the monsters. You've never seen them before. They're doing moves that you don't recognize. You can't read them. It's all new to you. But the more you play, the more you understand. Right? And the more you understand, the more competent you get at fighting. And the more competent you get at fighting, the more equipment you'll get. You'll get newer armor sets, you'll get newer weapons, you'll start getting to like demon drugs and mega demon drugs and stuff like that. You'll get like life powder, you'll learn where certain resources are, and it's all so satisfying, you know, because every monster is a challenge in their own right. And I feel like getting that monster's equipment is kind of a sign that you've conquered that challenge. You know, if you see someone who's in full Teostra gear and has a Teostra weapon, you know that they had to kill Teostra a shit ton of times to be able to get all of that armor and their weapon fully upgraded. Watch this fail, by the way, of a wake up. Hey, I'm helping too. But it's super satisfying to conquer a monster and show that you've conquered that monster. You can be like, hey, look at me, I've got the full Macau set, I've beaten the Macau, I've conquered this challenge. I've got the full Kezu set, I've conquered the Kezu, it's not a threat for me anymore, I can beat it. And it's like that because you know how many times that person had to fight him, and with every monster, well, most monsters, at least the hard ones, you're not going to learn the fight on your first time playing. Your first time fighting a monster, it's going to be very difficult, and you're just going to scrape through by the skin of your teeth if you win, right? The second time is going to be a little bit easier, but still difficult. Third time, again, still difficult, but a little bit easier. And every time you fight it, you're getting not only more materials, but also more knowledge of the monster. So by the time that you've got all of the materials you need for the full equipment set, you've learnt that monster back to front, unless you just smacked your head against a brick wall and refused to learn, right? You've overcome that challenge, so to speak. You're prepared for that monster now. You know how to fight it and whatnot. I just really like that aspect of Monster Hunter. I find it very, very satisfying. As we are once again fighting an Odogaron, and he is going to give me a hell of a hard time. This is a tempered Odogaron, actually, so he's going to be doing a lot of damage to me. And like I said, this Odogaron set that I'm wearing is not upgraded. Oh, God. Not a good idea. Which that's something I've been kind of neglecting, is upgrading my armor in Generations. I haven't bothered because I'm like, well, what happens when I get to high rank and I'm just going to have to farm all of the armor and grab all of the armor spheres and upgrade it all over again, like, you know? So I don't really want to do that. That being said, I will absolutely farm certain monsters to get a full armor set, but it's kind of like, I don't want to invest a shit ton of armor spheres in that armor set because I'm not going to use it once I get to high rank. But we just got carted. I actually decided after the second time I carted against this monster, I was like, I need to pull out a good defensive set. So I swapped my setup, got some actual defensive stuff, and, you know, played very tentatively. This was the point where I was like, you know, I'm getting a little bit better at using Charge Blade, but I'm not thinking as much as I was before. So I'm getting to the point where I can start feeling comfortable with the weapon, and I can start feeling confident. Like, I can feel like I can feel like I can autopilot, but I can't actually autopilot. So I'm getting to that level of competency where I'm starting to be able to do things in a more natural flow, but I'm not at that level of competency where I can do that, if that makes any sense. I'm kind of breaching a threshold of skill. That makes any sense. What am I doing? I'm just... yeah. Oh dear, I feel like Odogaron does not help Charge Blades all that well because he's aggressive enough to really put a dent in your plan of trying to do the Ultra or charge your sword or stuff like that. So you have to play kind of carefully before you decide to commit and go in. But if you can KO him, then it's perfect, isn't it? You can just get a shit ton of damage and you can stun it all to hell. But yeah, swapped out now, so I've got the Rocksteady Mantle on. And the Rocksteady Mantle is so good with the Charge Blade, because the Charge Blade has a lot of attacks that are really slow, that can easily be knocked out, or that you can be knocked out of doing. Rocksteady just stops that from happening. It's just sort of like, oh, well, you know, all of that stuff about being staggered and all that, nah, it's not going to happen. You don't need that. It's like, oh. And also increasing your defense as well. Let's not forget that. Because I can just walk through that. I mean, it wasn't a particularly good idea because I missed my Ultra and I took a lot of damage and I ended up bleeding. But you can do it, you know? It is possible. So, you know. And I'm still on the Sushi Fish. I refuse to use a Stare Jerky because I don't think it's as good. If you get onto the bleed quickly, then the Sushi Fish will just heal more. Because the Stare Jerky only heals the wounded health. It only heals the red. Whereas the Sushi Fish just gives you a flat amount. And if that flat amount will put you over the wounded, the red health, then it's going to give you a lot more than the Astera Jerky will ever give you, you know. And if you're on top of it, like I usually am, you know, you're always going to get it more. I don't know, it's just like, people are always like, oh yeah, Astera Jerky, you can just do that. But I'm like, nah, Sushi Fish, it's the way to go. It's better. And it still gives you the better health recovery and all that sort of good stuff. Oh dear, what am I doing? Now this is a situation where I might not get as much out of the Sushi Fish. Like, it might not heal as much. Oh, it's just still a little bit more. Yeah, it is effective. It is powerful. Get out of here, Basil Goose. I still refuse to fight Basil Goose. Oh dear. Is Basil Goose easy with the Charge Blade? I'd say can be. Potentially. Not 100%. all the time. Basilgoose is annoying. Owie. That's not a lot of life, and I almost died to the effluvium. Good God, that would have been such a frustrating way to end the fight. To fail the quest via effluvium, like, oh, that's nasty. Oh dear. But I mentioned earlier that I kind of wanted to, well, if I did have a 3DS capture card, then I would absolutely capture my 3DS gameplay for Monster Hunter Generations and put it in with the Weekly Hunt. Because Weekly Hunt isn't exclusively Monster Hunter World, it is just Monster Hunter in general. Like I said, don't have a 3DS capture card. But what I'm thinking is I might want to get an HDMI capture card so I can record Generations Ultimate. I don't know if a 3DS capture card is different from an HDMI or if they're the same thing or anything like that. I haven't done any of that research, but I'm thinking like I'm going to want to do Generations Ultimate content when that game comes out. And the best way to do that, HDMI capture card, and that also allows me to capture PS4 footage without having to rely on the share factory, which can kind of be a bit of a pain in the ass sometimes. And it'll actually also allow me to record gameplay on my 360 and my PS2. Like, everything that I own goes through HDMI into my TV, so I'd be able to record all of it, right? Thing is I would want a second monitor to monitor the recording, so it's like I've got my TV that I'm playing on, and then I've got my other monitor that I can view the recording, make sure it's actually recording, and I've got all the audio working and all that sort of good stuff going. Thing is, I also do not have a second monitor, so all of this costs money. It's like, I don't have it. So when I get this stuff, I have absolutely no idea, but there will be a point at which Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate content will come out. Whether it will be with the launch or not, I can't tell you. It's a shame, but it is what it is. You know, it's the way life goes. And actually, Generations Ultimate releases on August 28th, I think it was. I think it was 28th. Which is very lucky for me, because I'm actually going away on August the 1st through August 23rd. I was going to be away for the entirety of August, right? And Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate just so happens to come out on like 5 days after I get back. It's not coming out whilst I'm away, it's coming out after, so it's like I get back and then a few days later Generations Ultimate comes out. I'm just like, oh, that's perfect. I get to play day one. Yay. And again, I'm playing Switch Axe here because it's like I'm not confident with Charge Blade against Rathian. Check out that retreat attack. Anyone who tells you the retreat attacks on the Switch Axe are worthless, just show them that. Like, I have so many examples throughout the Weekly Hunt that show that actually the retreat attacks are incredibly powerful. It just like, if anyone says that they're not useful, they don't know what they're talking about. And I hate to be all elitist like that, but it really is like, you don't quite know what you're talking about. You don't quite understand their utility. And it's okay to not understand it, but it's another thing to just blurt out that, hey, this just doesn't work, without being able to back up your experience with it, you know? Which is something that I like to do. If I say something's good or it's useful or whatnot, I like to try and like show why, or at least explain it as in like a way that I can tell you that I've had experience with it. I can be like, this is why it's good, sort of thing, you know? I don't know, it's another one of those things where it's like the exhaust all over again, where exhaust is actually kind of useful. It's not incredibly powerful, but it is useful, you know? Like, I'm using the exhaust Switch Axe right now. I don't manage to KO Rathian, but the Rathian does end up being exhausted a couple of times. especially after the enraged state, you know. But also I was having a hard time actually charging the exhaust file, which kind of sucked, but, you know, it is what it is. I feel like with the exhaust file switch axes, like, I know it charges super fast, but I think it also depletes super fast as well. And this move, I said in the last episode that that move is the worst thing on the planet. It's my least favorite attack that the Rathian has. Because if it pins you in a corner, it's going to hit you multiple times, more often than not. Especially if you're panicking, and I have a tendency to panic when that move starts to come at me, like that, and then I'm stunned, and then I take more damage, and now you're going to turn around, and it's not so bad if you can see it coming, but it comes out so quick that it's very difficult to see it coming, and that was just dumb on my part. Why did I not try and dodge it? Oh dear. That kind of triple fireball kind of reminds me of Kezu. Like, I mentioned that the most recent, like, big monster that I fought was Kezu in Generations. And let me just tell you, man. Oh, that fight was not fun. And not fun in... Or, how should I say? It wasn't... How do I say it in a way that doesn't sound like it was fun? You know, it wasn't not fun. There's a double negative right there. In the sense that it was a ridiculously hard fight. Quite the opposite. It was a ridiculously easy fight, and it just dragged on because my damage just isn't good enough to be able to kill Kezu fast. Like, he's got so much of a wind-up on all of his attacks. He's so sluggish and slow, and then when he does attack, it's just adept bait. And even if you're not using adept, then you can still, like, get around it quite easily and punish it. And it's just like, dear. He's super slow, super sluggish, super telegraphed moves that aren't all that threatening. And on top of that, he's a bit of a wall in terms of the damage that I do, because I don't do damage. But also, he doesn't have theme music. It's like, I get that we're trying to go for like a creepy theme, but it's like, it just makes an already uninteresting fight into just a bit of a slogfest, unfortunately. Like, Kezu is kind of cool in a sense, but they did not quite pull him off all that well. It's a shame, but hey, there's always Giganox, right? And I'm starting to talk like I actually know a lot about Monster Hunter. I just watch a lot of videos on YouTube. That's all it is. Like, I'm not actually a super pro expert hunter. Like, I'm not like Gaijin Hunter who knows a shit ton about the game. I'm no like Apex Gaming who's just super good at the game. I'm kind of just an average player who's super passionate about the game and just loves talking about it and loves learning about it, you know? So I know a lot of different monsters. I know like how they attack, like what some of their attacks look like, even though I've never fought the monsters myself, you know? Like, I know, for example, that Tigrex's Roar actually deals damage, even though I've never fought him before. It's just, like I said, I watch a lot of videos on YouTube. I like this game. And hopefully you do too if you're watching this. I mean, we're at 53 minutes in at this point, 53 and a half. You've got to like Monster Hunter if you're watching this far, or you just like my voice, which, I mean, I appreciate it, but a little bit weird. I always find it hard to take compliments. Like, whenever someone's like, oh yeah, this is really cool, I like this about you, I'm like, thanks? Why? What are you doing? Shut up. No. I don't know, maybe it's a self-confidence issue thing, I don't know. This isn't psychology, this isn't therapy, this is Monster Hunter. We're here to kill monsters. Let's get this pink Rathian. Trying to cut off the tail? New to the poison, or am I going to go for the head, try and get the KO? I think I'm going to go for the head and try and get the KO. Doing Arena Quest solo makes it very difficult to try and take out certain monster parts. I don't know what it is, they don't seem to want to come off. But then again, I usually fight monsters solo, so I deal with their breakpoints in solo, and I end up managing to get the breakpoints that I want. I manage to get the statuses that I want. Whereas if I play in multiplayer, because they get raised, I maybe won't get the ones that I want, and it might be a lot harder. It's just one of those things. I like to play Monster Hunter solo to try and challenge myself, because it's like if I've got the full aggression or most of the aggression, if I can't rely on a human teammate, then I pretty much just have to rely on my own skill, and I kind of like that in a sense, because it forces me to play better, it forces me to make less mistakes, but at the same time, it's Monster Hunter, you know? It's meant to be fun. This is why, this is why we play Monster. This is why we play video games, is to have fun, and playing in multiplayer is a really fun way of actually, playing Monster Hunter. It's what it's designed for. It's designed to be in a group and actually hunt a monster together, which is something I'm not doing in Generations. I'm not sure if I will end up playing in multiplayer in Generations, because most people are probably a hell of a lot further into the game than me. This is a bit of a mistake, by the way. I tried to go for the explosion, but I just end up clipping her head. Them hitboxes, they are quite generous, actually, to the player, with the hitboxes. But anyway, this is pretty much the end of this week's weekly hunt. So I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I'm going to just go back and play some Generations, because I'm in love with that game. And I'll leave you with the rest of the guild cards. So I'll repeat my outro. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.